Hi class. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 8, Power in Politics, Women in the Progressive Era. So the Progressive Era is a time when the activism of both men and women is at the forefront of the national agenda. In this chapter, we explore how progressive women define their activism as an extension of their power as women, and the book calls this maternal power, and the things that they are being active for as a protection of women's needs. So this is maternal power versus maternal need. And I found this to be a very interesting concept. The women who are acting as progressives are mostly middle and upper class, and they define their activism as an extension of their motherhood, that as women they have power, and this is their power. But at the same time, the things that they're doing are meant to protect mothers, and in a way are demonstrating that lower class women do not have maternal power. In fact, lower class women are defined by their need as mothers. Some examples of maternal power are the argument for women's suffrage, that if women are given the right to vote, they will be able to wield their power as mothers to make effective decisions. Women's pursuit of higher education and their entrance into more professional organizations and professions in general. This is also an extension of maternal power, and especially the field of social science and the settlement movement. These are women who say, instead of taking care of just my own husband and my own children, I'm going to take care of an entire neighborhood in the way that a mother would. Maternal needs, on the other hand, are those that are met by social scientists and by social workers and by the settlement houses. These places and these services provide assistance for mothers who are in a state of maternal need. We also see a protection of motherhood in the movement to limit women's work days and to set a minimum wage for working women. These are both good ideas, to have a limited number of hours that someone can work in a day and to have a minimum amount of money they can make for their labor. The problem is when you try to apply a minimum wage or a maximum hours only to women in order to protect them. You are saying that women are not capable of entering into employment contracts on their own, that men can fend for themselves as far as this is concerned, but women are not strong enough to make these decisions, and ironically this is completely counter to what they are arguing at the exact same time in favor of giving women the vote, that women can in fact make decisions, contracts, etc. for themselves. In this chapter, we see the end of the women's suffrage movement, and in fact the triumph of the women's suffrage movement. In 1920, the 19th Amendment is passed, allowing all American women, if they are citizens, to vote. Now, even before this amendment is passed, about half of states allowed women to vote. They might not allow them to vote in every contest, but at least in a few, women are allowed to go down to the ballot box and say what they want to say. At the end of the women's suffrage movement, the approach that activists are using is different than the approach that was used at the beginning of the movement. In the beginning, women argued that they should be able to vote because it was fair, because women were as good as men, and they had a right to express their political opinions. Towards the end of the movement, it begins to appeal to such a wide array of women that this actually kind of radical idea would not go over very well. And so the argument tends to be one of expediency instead. If you give us the vote, we will be able to get all of these things done. We will be able to achieve our progressive reforms with the vote. And that's the argument that is ultimately successful in getting the vote to the majority of to all American women. The tipping point for the women's suffrage movement is women's participation in World War I. When World War I came around, most women agreed to table the discussion in order to assist with the war effort, in order to participate. And many of them went to work in the factories or in other areas where men were no longer employed. And their support of the war effort, they believed, would demonstrate that women were ready to be equal participants in society. And in fact, this is the case. Also for the Prohibition movement, they are also successful at this point. We wind up at the end of Wilson's term and at the end of World War I with the majority of Americans supporting women's suffrage. It's still close, but they do ultimately pass the women's suffrage amendment. At the moment that the women's movement achieves this huge victory, we have another aspect of the fight for women's rights emerge, and that is feminism as a movement. So, since we began this study, when women are active outside the home, they do so in a way that's still defined by what women as mothers are able to do, and they're shown as being selfless in whatever they promote. And feminists start to ask why this should be the case. Why should it be the case that if a woman wants to, say, oppose the war, oppose World War I, she has to do so by saying that she didn't raise her boy to be a soldier. She has to present her pacifism as an aspect of her relationship with men. Why can't she just be against war for its own sake? As women start to ask this question, they also take the idea of individualism that American men have been very much in favor of and say this should apply to women too. Women should be allowed to be happy. Women should be allowed to have fun. If a woman thinks that she can be happy and have fun by conforming to existing gender ideas, good for her. If that's not going to help her, then she shouldn't have to. These ideas about what women can and can't do, who they should or should not be, these are not actually helpful, and feminists start trying to turn these ideas on their head. The feminist movement is going to become very important in the next few chapters, and so will women's labor, which was also covered in this chapter in more detail than here in my video. So I hope that we'll enjoy watching these themes develop and moving forward toward the way that men and women are and the way that men and women work today. As always, let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to reading your discussion for this week.